I finished reading the note my lawyer had just handed me and smiled, then shifted my gaze to the other end of the room. Laura, my hopefully soon-to-be ex-wife, was there with her lawyer. She looked over and gave me a nervous but confident smile. Nervous because deep down she really didn't want the divorce I was seeking. I had provided her with a good life for the past 25-plus years. She was able to stay out of work without any pressure to go back to work, even after our youngest left for college at the beginning of the year. She was sure we would have made up if only she had been assigned a counselor who shared her point of view. Of course, then her life of luxury and leisure would have continued uninterrupted. In fact, she was so confident that she had pinned all her hopes on it. Confident because it was Judge Reynolds who was our family court judge. It was said of the infamous Judge Reynolds that he had a collection of male organs hanging on his office wall, so extensive that you could barely walk through the door. He never, not once in his entire career, sided with the husband no matter what the wife did. He could give the cheating wife a house, and the offended husband would pay all the utilities. Non-working wives were usually paid alimony that would rival the GDP of a third-world country. Meanwhile, the ex-husband was left living in a shoebox at the county dump, wishing he had enough money to afford macaroni and cheese. Yes, for the past 15 years or so, Reynolds has been a man universally hated by a large number of divorced men in our county. You may ask why his disgruntled ex-husband didn't straighten him out sooner? It may have had something to do with his personal wealth, some of which he distributed to local charities, usually through his beautiful young trophy wife. Alternatively, it could have been his support by the powerful local Christian lobby. Personally, I thought the only reason he wasn't fired years ago was because he must have had pictures of someone very high up in the legal hierarchy in a compromising pose with a sheep. Oh yes, Laura had a reason to feel confident and smug. At that moment, the bailiff stood up and shouted, "Stand up, everyone!" I reluctantly stood up as all 150 pounds of Judge Jeffrey Reynolds clumsily walked through the side door at bench level and teetered toward his reinforced chair, which creaked protestingly under the weight of his body. He looked flushed from dragging his bloated body from lunch to his bench. He glanced at the notes lying before him, then nodded to the bailiff, and he spoke. "This is the continuation of Brown v. Brown, the Honorable Judge Reynolds presiding." The courtroom was filled with the rustle of clothes as asses hit the seats. I might as well not have bothered to sit down when he nodded for me to stand up. The judge looked at me mockingly and said, "I see that 5 days ago you completed your last stay in prison, Mr. Brown. I see it was your fourth 30-day incarceration in the county jail for contempt of court. As I said at the time I imposed this sentence, I believe that couples counseling is mandatory in any dissolution of marriage. Marriage is an institution blessed by God, and a person must mobilize every resource available to them to avoid breaking the heavenly union or incurring the wrath of God. Are you now willing to give your wife a chance to explain to you, under the guidance of a professional counselor, how you have failed her?" I nearly choked on the effort to keep from throwing up at his insulting words. This guy could have made Mother Teresa lose her temper and throw something at him, but instead, I forced my voice to sound strong and steady. "If, after you and my wife hear what I have to say, you both still want me to participate in this counseling charade, I'll agree." I was surprised that I was able to finish that statement, even though my attorney told me that the judge was obligated to let me say whatever I wanted to say. This judge had a record of being largely unrestrained in breaking the rules to serve his own unhealthy ends. "Well, then speak your mind, but please keep it short. I have a busy schedule of marriages to save." I cleared my throat and began. "As I've said before, in my 27 years of marriage, I've had plenty of opportunities to lose my way. I still have my looks, and rich and powerful men attract a certain type of woman who throws themselves at you. I've never slacked, despite the stress of starting my own business and growing it to its current size. I think I had a right to expect the same from my wife, after all. She hadn't worked outside the home since she found out she was pregnant with our first child. She didn't have the responsibility of being the sole breadwinner for the family, the stress of running a business, or the enormous workload that I did. Besides, you were right. Marriage is an institution blessed by God, and we both stood before one of its representatives and swore fidelity to each other." "Go on, Mr. Brown, we've heard this rant before." I am simply saying, Your Honor, that I do not think in any way that I deserve the treatment that I received on March 20th of this year. The judge rolled his eyes but did not interrupt. I did not deserve to come home early from work to find a guy sitting in my living room and the sounds of sexual activity coming from upstairs. I also didn't deserve the shock I got when I started up the stairs and the guy in the living room yelled at me, "Hey, don't cut in line! I'm next!" I noticed that at this point Laura looked visibly disturbed. She may be a slut, but she certainly didn't want our dirty laundry on display. The judge interrupted me. It's not my place to comment on the morals of society. I need to make sure the institution of marriage is protected and the family unit is safeguarded. I wanted to shout, "What the hell is the family unit? Our kids haven't been home in a long time, and they haven't spoken to their mother since she admitted to her disgusting behavior." But I did that last time and incurred the wrath of the judge and earned an extra 3 days in the cell. So I shut up and sizzled with the good judge's stare. I also don't think I deserve to walk into my own bedroom and see my wife lying on her back with her legs around some young gym teacher's buttocks, urging him, "Take me deeper." I know for a fact that I didn't deserve that humiliation when I was told to go downstairs and wait for them to finish. The only bright spot in my shitty life over the past 5 months was remembering the look on that gym rat's face when I ignored my wife's instruction to go back downstairs. First, the annoyed look when I pulled him away from my whore wife, then the look of utter horror when I threw him backwards down the stairs. He ended up with bruises and a broken collarbone before I threw him his clothes. The guy waiting in the living room ran off when I gave him a hard look. He was still unknown to the police and therefore not a witness. The judge interrupted me again irritably. "When will your assault case be heard in court?" "At the end of next month, Your Honor." As I've said 1,000 times, Mr. Brown, the actual conduct of the parties to a marriage is irrelevant. What matters is the principled approach. You could come home and catch your wife with the entire local soccer team, but I wouldn't care. I would still defend the sanctity of the marriage and her rights. Domestic violence can never be excused, even against a man who helped your wife adjust to your shortcomings as a husband. I explained that all of this will be handled by a counselor. As you may know, I see it as my job to economically punish spouses who either don't participate in counseling or ignore its benefits. The smiling fat man then leaned back in his chair, allowing me to continue. I continued without paying attention to what he said. I certainly didn't deserve the conversation I had with my wife after her lovers left. Obviously, I am a fantastic husband, and she loves me madly, but no man can satisfy her these days, and so she is adamant that she will continue to have lovers. She told me that I could either get over it or file for divorce, at which point, in her words, "I'll be blown away." A slight smile at the memory of that. Those words on tape were the reason the kids wouldn't talk to her, and her friend list shrank several times over. The fat man in the court chair couldn't help himself again. "Why do you insist on boring us with your denunciation, Mr. Brown? I have explained several times that your wife's behavior, past and present, is irrelevant here. My role is to make every effort to avoid the breakdown of the marriage and to ensure your wife's financial well-being. I believe this marriage can be saved, and your wife wants nothing more than for you to return to her loving arms. I warn you again, if you do not participate in the counseling I have ordered and return to the duties of a husband, the award I will give your wife will be much higher than your attorney suggests, and you will go nowhere." So, thought I, once again, women can do no wrong. It had nothing to do with money, she just had needs. I'm going to burst that bubble. As I said earlier, Your Honor, if after my wife hears about the deal I am offering she still wants to seek counseling, I will reluctantly comply. But let her be warned that the expiration date on this deal is 1 hour. If there's no signature within the hour, we'll go to counseling, which won't change anything, but even taking into account your legendary decisions, her ultimate reward will be less than this offer. I do wish you would not tarnish the great institution of marriage by reducing it to a value expressed in dollars and cents. That being said, what is your offer? My attorney finally got up to speak, reciting the offer we had agreed upon. My client will transfer ownership of the Brown family home to Mrs. Brown, paying all government fees upon said transfer. He will transfer 90% of the value of all bank accounts opened in his name only, and in the joint names of Mr. David and Mrs. Laura Brown to a bank account of her choice. In addition, he will sign a document promising to transfer 40% of all future profits of Brown Engineering or any other legal entity he establishes in the future in Australia to the former Mrs. Laura Brown. In order to do this, my client expects Mrs. Brown to relinquish all need for counsel, cease all opposition to the divorce, and return to her maiden name as soon as possible. I could see Laura and her attorney having a heated discussion at their table. Then her attorney rose. "Your Honor, if Mr. Brown's offer is indeed as generous as stated, we will be happy to sign the deal within the hour." His noble laxity looked disappointed that greed had once again taken precedence over principle. But as he looked at them, he realized that the matter was hopeless. Pending receipt of a signed copy of the appropriate proposal, I hereby dissolve the marriage of David and Laura Brown. The dissolution will take effect in 30 days. He banged his gavel. We all stood up. His chair groaned in relief as he waddled away. I glanced over at Laura's table and saw that both she and her lawyer were grinning like Cheshire cats. She, because her life of excess and luxury could go on indefinitely. He, because of the large percentage he would earn on the deal. As I watched, he began to read into the details of the deal. I wished I was there after Monday. It would be the first opportunity to find out that the house Laura had taken full possession of was mortgaged up to its eyeballs. The bank accounts were almost empty, and I no longer owned any companies in Australia. My lawyer called 2 hours later to say that the judge had ratified the deal and was busy ruining some other poor guy's life. I packed the last of my belongings, checked to make sure my passport was in place, grabbed a $300 bottle of sparkling wine, which by law we were no longer allowed to call champagne, and headed to my friend with benefits. In my defense, I didn't date Lucy until after Laura ruined our marriage, and for all you Puritans who scream, "But you're still married," I considered the marriage over as soon as Laura's behavior became public knowledge. So, I'm not perfect. Sue me. Lucy is younger than my 47 and, I must say, not that smart. But she does have a very generous soul, the most fantastic blue eyes, and a stunning body that supported my wounded ego as she seemed to appreciate my size and stamina. I could bury my face in her lush hollow and stay there forever. It took almost 4 weeks to seduce her. Again, in my defense, it's hard to get into any kind of relationship when your stubbornness keeps getting you locked up in the local jail. After I tasted her charms, she really wanted more of mine, assuring me that I was giving her bliss not caused by plastic surgery in 15 years. As soon as I heard the deal was done, I called her to see if I could come over. She said she was free at the moment but had another appointment around 7. I knew she couldn't always stop drinking, so I didn't open the bottle until we were in bed with her. Walking naked to the refrigerator, I returned to the bedroom with the expensive bottle and 2 glasses. Lucy giggled from the 3rd sip from the first glass to the bottom of the 2nd. She looked like an obsessive, insatiable woman. After being cooped up for a month, I had plenty in the tank, if you know what I mean. Finishing her bottle, she didn't notice me turning the bedside clock to the wall. Lucy was in no condition to speak, but I was. "Hello, Judge Reynolds. Welcome home. I was just helping Lucy adjust to your shortcomings as a husband." Epilogue. I was out of the country to face the assault charge because I now live on a tropical island that has no extradition treaty with my country. The fact that I delayed the legal process allowed my attorney's partner to finalize the preparations for all the cases as I wanted. My business was sold to a company with a Swiss address for a small fraction of its value. A thorough search of international records might have revealed that the new owner was my brother, but I'm pretty sure my soon-to-be ex-wife didn't have the resources to trace things that far back. Most of my other assets have been sold, and the proceeds, along with the bulk of our bank accounts, have been transferred to company accounts or placed in a secure trust for my children's education. They will both be able to go to the most prestigious universities at home or abroad, and they will have money left over to give up. Of course, Laura would get half of what was left when their education was completed, but since it would be at least 5 years before that time, I personally didn't care. The downside to my new home was that I was also unable to attend the assault hearings for Judge Reynolds, or should I say, former Judge Reynolds. After the shock of catching me in bed with his wife had passed, he pounced on me with fists. Lucy, a little stupefied by the combination of alcohol and my caresses, tried to come between us. He knocked her down with one meaty elbow. I let him land one blow on me before I brought him down with a knee to the groin. It looked great on the footage from the camera on the bedside table. He was expelled from the Law Society and jailed for 2 years for assaulting Lucy. After becoming an embarrassment to the entire local legal community, the judge who sentenced him refused to place him under any special type of protective custody other than general prison. His reputation and the fact that he was a former judge guaranteed that he would have no friends among the prisoners. Fortunately, he was so unattractive that even Bubba left him alone, but he was constantly harassed and picked on. Of course, the media pounced on the story of the judge's death like sharks attacking an injured diver, and Laura's story was splashed all over the national media. They continued to hound her until she lost her home, unable to pay her debts for even a month. I became a little infamous, like Robin Hood or Ned Kelly. I rolled over onto my other side under the rays of the early morning tropical sun, contemplating the woman lying next to me. Was today the day I would bury my face in that gorgeous cleavage and stay there forever? She was a recently divorced woman who ended up ripping off her rich ex-husband during the divorce. Don't look at me like that. I didn't take any of her money. A monthly check from my brother allowed me to live in luxury for the rest of my days. Tomorrow the children are due to arrive on the island for the 3rd time. They have become very attached to Lucy. They will never forgive me if I offend her sweet, simple soul. They will no doubt bring me news of Laura's latest follies. I already knew she'd lost her home, moved out of our neighborhood due to sheer humiliation, rented a 1-bedroom apartment while working as a waitress, and aged 20 years. The kids tried to talk me into forgiving her on their first visit, but I showed them videotapes of me going into the bedroom that day and her subsequent confession to me and her demands. That put an end to their attempts to talk me into leniency. They still pick up the phone when she calls, but any close relationship that was always based on respect is gone. Sometimes I wonder if she has the energy to drive trains now. Phew, enough negative crap, time to start our day. Lucy smiled before she even opened her gorgeous blue eyes. Epilogue to epilogue. After all, by the time Jeffrey Reynolds was released, he had become a shadow of his former self. He was a recluse until his untimely death 5 years later. His grave is a popular urinal for divorced men with retained anger issues.